All right, it's 4:05. Let's get started. Um, just because today is day one, I just want to make sure to tell you that generally we won't have things scheduled past 4 o'clock. Um, we just are on a short week because of the holiday, and there's a lot to pack in. So that's why we're doing the kickoff now. But yeah, don't you shouldn't have to expect to be here later than 4 on most days. So just want to be clear about that. All right, so yeah, let's jump into this. First project is War or Peace, and we've got some of the learning goals here. There's a couple of things to kind of think about here. We'll have what's called an interaction pattern, and you might not be familiar with that term yet, but kind of like we say what the code should be doing, and if you follow your tests or follow the interaction pattern exactly, then when you type a command, the return value should be exactly what the interaction pattern shows you. And it'll be similar in both like the independent challenges and these projects. We'll have an interaction pattern, and I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. But yeah, some of the learning goals are really to write some tests. I know you haven't had a lesson on that yet. We have some of the first few tests for iteration 1 written out for you, so you'll be able to see like what some tests look like and what kind of like what the structure is of a testing pattern. We want you to be able to like write some readable code that adheres to specific Ruby conventions that we are going to dive into a little bit more throughout the week. And the idea here is that we're going to create an object-oriented solution to this problem of creating a game of that basically a computer version of the game War, the card game War. And yeah, we're going to create objects. So this kind of ties in with Ruby convention to interact and achieve the goal of playing the game. And then, yeah, we'll use GitHub to host the code, and we'll use Git to commit frequently throughout the project. All right, and so if you're not familiar with War, that's okay. I suggest like spending some time here. I believe this is the Wikipedia page. And it just kind of tells you like what the game looks like, what to expect, what the rules are, what the conditions are. So if you're not familiar with it, then definitely check this out. There is some nuance in this project that might be like just slightly different than what happens in the actual game, but that's kind of like further down the line. Yeah, and so we've broken this project into, small chunks of pieces of functionality that we think help you all get started and help you all understand kind of like how to build something from a small kernel of an idea and a small chunk of functionality, and then kind of like iterate and build on that. And yeah, so we'll have the user of the game will be able to create 2 players, and then you'll be able to watch these players interact and play the game as we go through. So hold on one second, I gotta close this door. Okay, cool. So let's go into the setup. All right, so the first thing that we'll need you to do is to fork the repository here on the setup page and then clone your fork. All right, this is pretty important because we don't want you to clone the original repo, which is owned by the Turing School, because then you won't be able to push to it. So you need to fork your own repo, and then you need to clone that fork. All right, so we have a command here for Git once you've cloned that you can see kind of like, oh, did I clone the right one? You want this to look like You want the output in the terminal to look like this, where it's pointing to your username as the origin, and then the War Peace repo. All right, so if y'all have had enough experience with Git and GitHub via mod 0, so I'm not going to go through how to do this, but I will go through the iterations and like how that's going to work. Yeah. Any questions so far on like this setup piece? I think you all should probably feel pretty okay with this, but if you're not, that's all right. You can ask a question now. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is a cool link from Priya that you can play online. I think like if you're not familiar with the game, take some time to read about it, take some time to play it, and then it'll kind of like make more sense as far as how we structure things. Cool, so let's look at the requirements. So yeah, like we said, we kind of like have broken this down into iterations. And if I look here at iteration 1, I can see that we have an overview of what a card represents, and you will need to build a card object to represent one of the traditionally 52 decks of cards, or for 52 cards that are in a traditional deck of cards. So yeah, so this is kind of like some instructions, some setup instructions of how to get your test suite to run. So if you're in the root directory of your project, so I think I might just show you all this. Let me get this here. So right now, if I run an LS, I'm in staff Turing. I'm just gonna make a fake War Peace project, War Peace, and go into it. And there's nothing in it now, but what will be in it will be a lib directory and a test directory. Now, if I look at that, at this point, I am at the root of my project, all right? I am at War Peace, and I have a lib directory and a test directory. Now, some common pitfalls is students are changing directories, and then they're still trying to run the same commands when they're in this like different directories. Remember, for this specific command to work, Ruby test cardtest.rb, you're executing this cardtest.rb Ruby file. So you need to be in the War Peace project for you to be able to run this. And so mine's not going to run because I don't have a card test. But this is what it would look like. You do this from the root, all right? And so it's going to tell me like no such file, cardtest.rb. That's a load error. But when you clone the project down, you will have a card test in there, and you will be able to run this. All right. One condition: you can run this line from anywhere, and it'll install the Minitest gem globally on your computer. So you need to have Minitest installed because the testing suite depends on Minitest, the gem Minitest being installed for it to be able to run. So before your test can run, you need to run gem install Minitest if you haven't already. If you haven't done like mythical creatures or anything like that, then you'll need to do this. So moving forward, you're going to create a card class, and that card class should correspond to this interaction pattern below. This is kind of like one way to see if your card class is written correctly, where you can go into pry, and similarly, like you would do this from the root directory. So the same place I just was, I could go into a pry session by just typing pry, and then I could run these commands. And if I have my folders set up correctly, then it will run and I would get a true back here. I don't have that because I haven't created a card file, right? Like I haven't done that. So I I don't have this. And so if you're getting messages such as this, like, I can't load this, I don't know what to do, what are you trying to do? Ruby is telling me I haven't set this up properly, then you probably need to go about making a card file and creating it in a way that it corresponds to this interaction pattern. So if you make the card file correctly, then you should be able to kind of like copy and paste this into pry from the root of your directory and have these return values here match up when you run these commands. Okay, so here's a command. If that returns true, great, we're looking good, moving on. This is similar to what your tests are doing. Your tests are testing that you can do the same thing that you would be doing here in the interaction pattern in pry. So you can think of them as kind of like two separate ways to verify behavior. We are really going to focus on testing. Testing is like one of the most important pieces, not only of this mod, but of being a developer in general. So we are going to really focus on testing. However, this is another way that I can go into pry very quickly and start trying things out, right? This is a quick way for me to experiment in pry, and we have kind of like this interaction pattern to show you what should happen when you run these specific commands. And then we get into a deck, and a deck class will have an accompanying test file, and it should be able to execute these instance methods on the deck class. And there's also some interaction pattern parts for you to be able to like play with in pry or experiment with in pry. And yeah, I'm not going to go through this, but it kind of looks pretty similar to the card. And so the idea here is, well, we need a card to be our first kind of like starting point. It's our most basic class that we're going to build. And then to be able to build a deck, well, we need cards to exist to then be able to build a deck. And then we kind of build from there and iterate, so on and so forth. One thing I'll say, we obviously haven't taught you everything that you need to know to do this project. We totally get that. That's kind of the point. Google is your friend. Your classmates are your friend. All of the students in here that are repeating and have seen this project before are certainly great resources for you all. And your mentors are also great resources. The one thing I'll say is get started as soon as possible, because generally everything in software takes, I would even say like twice as long as software engineers think it's going to take, just in general. Like that's what I've seen as I've kind of worked at different places. And if you go into it with that mindset, then you will be starting as soon as possible and spending as much quality cognitive energy as possible on these projects, because they generally like at Turing, the projects are going to get harder as we go throughout the iterations. So it's like we have iteration 1 here. If I go back to the requirements, there's iteration 2, there's 3, there's 4. Things are only getting harder as we go. So the sooner I start and the sooner I jump into iteration 1, the better off I'm going to be moving forward. So I would suggest starting tonight. Take whatever kind of, today's a big day. Take your break. Do what you got to do, but certainly I encourage you all to start tonight and get those question threads going. That's what I'll say there. There's generally, if you have a question, I guarantee 4 or 5 others have a question. And like I said earlier, you don't have the luxury of being able to like easily like grab a student from the hallway or grab a student sitting next to you. So like, you got to get the questions started in Slack, get the conversations going. All right, that's a lot. I'll take questions from anyone that has them.
Hey, Tim, I just wanted to kind of shout out there. I think Dan started a thread for the War Peace Project for code help. Just so we have a place, everybody understands that they have a place that they can go to put their stuff.
Great. Yeah, so that would be here, I believe, then. Awesome. Thanks, Dan, for doing that. Anyone else have questions coming up?
I would just say
Ms.
quickly, sorry, Tim, to interrupt.
You're good.
Even if you do think you understand the game, I would still maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes either playing it or reading the wiki about it. 15 minutes invested now might save you a couple hours here down the road. So definitely make sure you understand that, read the setup and the pattern and everything that Tim's going through right now. I think some time now is definitely a good investment.
Yep, certainly. I would like suggest like reading through like all of iteration one. If you get kind of like overwhelmed at like what things are asking, go back to the start and be like, okay, I need to understand one thing at a time. What is this gem install mini test? Let's go from there and let's get started there. So you break down the problem to its smallest chunk and start getting started on it that way. I see some questions in the chat about when it is due. So it is due Monday at 8:30 a.m. So you have the holiday weekend to also work on this. Friday we are out, so we won't have anything due on holidays. Yeah.
Just have a kind of a silly question here about this. It's like, you know, I know I have to follow the prompts and I'm, you know, building the tests based on what it's asking me to do, right? But that means that I'm gonna have to build 52 cards instances.
So not exactly, but yeah, I like where your head's at. Eventually, like when you get to that part of the project, yes, you will need 52 card objects. Like most things in programming, there is always a way to do that quickly and efficiently rather than writing it out 52 times. And I encourage you to like think about it in that in those terms of like, all right, how can I like efficiently build my 52 card deck that I'm going to need? But I will say like that is further along into the project, like iteration 3, 4.
That helps me with my question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question.
I have a question. I'm already kind of struggling with doing the setup here. Like I cloned the repository and I installed Minitest, and then I go to run the Ruby test / card test RB. It's not working. It's saying that doesn't even exist.
All right. So did you remember to change directories into your War Peace project when you cloned it down?
Yeah, I'm in the War Peace directory.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's see. I'm not going to go into it too much right now, this specific of like this problem, but here's what I will encourage you to do is practice asking the question in the channel with a screenshot of both your terminal, the command you're running. Make sure that like you don't have typos, things like that. Make sure that you actually do have a card test.rb that exists in the directory that you're trying to run it from. And yeah, post a screenshot of the error. And I bet, I will imagine that some kind soul in this room will be able to help out. Cool. Anyone else have other kind of questions coming up?
I just want to kind of chime in and just say that it's okay to feel uncomfortable. That's probably going to be the biggest feeling that a lot of us will experience. And that's the reason why we don't get all the information right away. It can seem kind of scary not to have all the information right away, but it's just going to really, really help you grow as a critical thinker, and also as kind of consider this an entry-level way to create a process that works well for you. Because if you can create a strong process, then kind of what he was alluding to earlier, you can apply the process to any language that you're learning or anything really that you're doing. But absolutely use that thread. And we're all here as a collective to help one another, even though we're kind of doing this solo. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to feel uncomfortable. I have shed many tears on our Zoom calls. So vulnerability is welcome. And we're all here for the same purposes, and I think that everybody's going to do awesome. So just take a deep breath and just break it into the smallest chunks you can. And when you do get stuck, just reach out.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that, Danny. And then I appreciate Dan and Arike's try again. Crying this mod is true. This stuff is hard. It's not going to be. It's not going to come quick. It's not going to come easy, and we're not going to just hand it to you either. So that's kind of like what you should expect. And what I'll say is there's no substitution for the hours that you put in working. There just isn't. It doesn't exist. You can't, there's no easy way. There's no shortcuts. You got to put in the hours. You got to put in the time. And if you find yourself not making progress for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and you're like, I'm still stuck on the same thing, it's either time to reach out to one of your resources, or it's probably time to try something totally new, or maybe go review some material based on what you're trying to do. All these lessons are available for you to kind of like look ahead and see if you can kind of grab some tidbits of information that might help. And then you know the classes are coming. So yeah, that's all I'll say on that. Kat or Mike, anything that y'all wanted to add on this project or anything in general?
Negative.
Cool. Other questions from students? All right. You made it through day one. That's exciting. Great job, y'all. Like we said, reach out to each other, take your break, take some time. You've had a long day, but definitely get started tonight. Don't wait. There's no substitute for hours put in, and there's no makeup time here, and you'll learn that quickly. So thanks for the engagement today. Thanks for showing up. We will see y'all tomorrow.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.